Hey, rich friends, it's Dr. TMac here. And in today's episode, I'm super nervous about today's episode because I'm going to be very, very vulnerable with you and let you know, like, who TMac is and let you know who TMac was before she became TMac. So stay tuned.
So T-Mac, talk to us about pretty much your upbringing and growing up in South Carolina.
Whew. Okay. Well, I have one sister from my mom. She's 7 years younger. And I have one brother from my dad. He's also 7 years younger than I am. Um, so I'm the oldest of two siblings. And my mom was a single parent. Uh, my very early years growing up, we lived in the house with my grandmother. We called her Granny. Well, I had older uncles and aunties, so it was kind of like, and I had, two older cousins. It was fun, in the early years. It was super fun because we were the babies in the family and we were spoiled. I was the only girl granddaughter at the time, and it was really cool. Things started to change when my mom moved out. I was seven, or six or seven when she moved out. We moved into an apartment, and one of the earliest memories that I have, with, I guess, the relationship with my mom was seeing her she was pregnant with my sister, seeing her being abused physically. That was, very touching, more than touching. I don't know. It did something to me. And I remember jumping in between my mom and her boyfriend at the time and trying to break it up. And then seeing, it happen repeatedly, it started bringing some confusion. I didn't really know how to separate it, but that was my earliest memory of, I guess, abuse and what abuse looked like physically. But my escape from that was going to my grandmother's on my dad's side. That was my escape. And also my aunt who lived in Atlanta, she was married to an NBA player. And they would come and get me for the summers, for all, the winter breaks and things like that. And they didn't have children at the time. So it was kind of like, I don't know if you heard the story, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So when I would be, on my dad's side of the family, my granddad was an entrepreneur. My grandmother didn't work. She sewed, she canned foods, she did all these things for the community. She had her own garden, and I would help her do that. And things just looked different on that side of the family. We would go to all of the Atlanta Hawks games, and, my auntie would take me to the wives' den, and I got to see the lavish side of life. And then when I would go home to my mom, it was, we were poor. Like, we didn't have a car. We walked everywhere. It was different. And I got to see both sides of life. And I really believe that that's why I'm who I am today, because I knew that there was better, but I also knew what it was like not to have.
Okay, so can we talk about more about having a baby at 13 and what that did for you and
Yes,
basically shaped you into who you are today and everything?
for sure. So when I got pregnant at 13 years old, of course that would be scary for anybody. I was a cheerleader. Was definitely afraid of my mom. Didn't want to tell her. Didn't know how to tell her. So I hid it as long as I could, obviously. And then one day, she was like, "I'm taking you to the doctor." Went to the doctor. He confirmed, yes, I was pregnant. And immediately, she was like, "Okay, well, she needs to have an abortion." The doctor was like, "No, she's too far gone." And remember, now this is back in 1989. So he was like, now they can do abortions when you're further along. And he was like, "No, she's too far gone. You can't do that." And then the next thing my mom said was, "Okay, well, we'll give the baby away." And I had really no say. I was 13. I didn't have a say so about anything. And she talked to my uncle and his wife at the time, and they were like, they didn't have any children together. He had an older son, but before they got married. And so she was like, they were like, yeah, we would love to take the baby, blah, blah, blah. And I had absolutely no voice. And I was just watching everything move around me. And I was hearing people talk about me in third person as if I wasn't there. And it was like I was in like a twilight zone, like what is going on? And like literally every single day of that pregnancy until the time I delivered, it was from morning to night. It was, you know, you're not going to amount to anything. You're going to be on welfare. You're going to have 5 or 6 kids by 5 or 6 different men. You'll never be anything. It was always negative, negative, negative. And I didn't know. I mean, that's what I was getting in my house. And I did have friends. And then obviously when I was pregnant, their parents made them, you can't hang around her because you'll end up like her. So then I didn't have friends anymore. It was lonely. I can't say I was depressed because I didn't know what depression was. I just did what I had to do. I was still in school. So I went to school every day, came home, and, I had to hear it. Just the constant negativity. Then when I had my son, my appendix ruptured, actually. I was 8 months pregnant. My appendix ruptured. I was vomiting for a whole weekend, green stuff. Nobody knew that my appendix had ruptured. My mom kept taking me to the emergency room, and they kept sending me home saying she's not in labor, she's not in labor. And then I'll never, ever forget this. Finally, she took me back to the emergency room. She says she's still throwing up. Something is wrong. They brought in a surgeon, and I was laying on the bed, and he touched me on my stomach, and I jumped off the bed because I was in so much pain. And he said, her appendix is ruptured, and we got to rush her to surgery because we have to save the baby. And he sent a nurse in to come prep me for surgery. She was shaving my belly. And she looked and I was screaming because it was hurting. And she got this close to me, and she said, you wasn't screaming when you was getting this baby, so shut up. And that was the last thing I remember before surgery. And when I woke up, that was the first thing I remembered. And they had me hooked up, NG tubes, everything, pumping out poison. I was completely septic. I had abscesses behind my lungs all over. I was in the hospital for like a month and a half after that, on morphine drips. It was a nightmare. One nurse came and saw me every single day. She was like an angel, and she sat by my bed every day when she wasn't working and talked to me, and she read the Bible to me and things like that. Well, she'd ask me some kind of way. She'd ask me what happened, and I told her what the other nurse said. But when I was discharged from the hospital, the administrator called, and my mom told the administrator what I said, and they fired that nurse immediately. But what that did to me that's when I decided I wanted to be a nurse. I was actually 13 when I decided I wanted to be a nurse, because I knew that if one nurse had the power to make me feel like boo-boo, like the scum of the earth, and then another nurse had the power to make me feel like I could do anything in the world, if they had possessed that much power, I wanted to do that in a positive way. And that's when I decided I wanted to be a nurse, because I wanted to help people not only physically get well, but I wanted to impart such positivity in their life. So that's what that was like. Then when my son was, July, August, September, October, November, 5 months old, it was December the 5th, 1989. The reason why I remember that date is because this is my mom's birthday. I'd been out of school for like 3 or 4 days, because she told me I needed to quit school. I was in the 9th grade. She said, you can't go to school because I'm not going to babysit your child. You're going to stay here and keep your child. And I remember that morning, December the 5th, 1989, I called my grandmother and I said, Grandma, I haven't been to school all week. My mom said I have to quit school. And she said, let me talk to your mom. And my mom didn't say hello. I gave her the phone and she said, come get her. And my grandma said, okay. And she said, and her son. And my grandmother said, okay. 10 minutes later, my grandmother was there. I packed all my clothes. I packed my son's clothes. We got in the car. And that night, the very first night, I was at my grandmother's house. We were in my bedroom. And she said, get on your knees and so we can pray. She's a Sunday school teacher, real heavy in the church. And I was like, okay. So I got on my knees and my grandmother started praying. And she started thanking God for my mom. And she was thanking her for the decision that she made to allow her to take me and my son in. And as she's praying for my mom and thanking God for my mom, I'm looking at her with one eye open like, you praying for somebody to just kick me out the house? Like, what are you doing? Like, I didn't understand that part. And anyway, she taught me how to pray. And she taught me how to pray for people who I thought was against me or my enemies and friends. She taught me how to pray. And so after we got up from praying, she said, you can be whoever and whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. And you can have whatever you want to have because I'm going to see to that. My job is to make sure that you and your son are taken care of. And my life changed completely.
So let's talk about like becoming a nurse and how you got there, and then how nursing led you to who you are today and what you're doing today.
Okay, so becoming a nurse. So I graduated high school when I was 17. My senior year in high school, I also took my first year of nursing. So I was going to high school and nursing at the same time. And then after I graduated, I had 9 more months of nursing. And then so I became a nurse at 18 years old. I worked for a doctor. He gave me my first job when I was in nursing school, Dr. Moss. Super. I mean, I learned so much. And, just by him giving me a chance, it just made me feel like, wow, I do have something to offer, right? The world. And I was his nurse for a long time. I was one of his nurses for a long time. And then I went into the nursing home and I worked, the nursing home. I worked in hospitals and things like that for about 2 or 3 years. And then I was doing hair on the side for people. People wanted me, they would come to my house and I would do their hair. And then I just got an unction, like I believe from God, like you need to go to school and get your cosmetology license. And I did immediately. I signed up for school and it took me 10 months. I got my cosmetology license. I started working in a salon and I was working as a nurse on the weekend. So I kind of, was doing both. And then maybe within a year, I got my own salon with 2 other ladies. We went in business together. And then after that, I got my own salon across town. So I've owned 2 salons. I did that for many years. And then I reached a pinnacle in my career. And I was like, I didn't want my children to grow up in a small town like I did. And I was like, okay, I want something different, but I don't know where I want to go or what I want to do. I just want my children to be exposed to more than what I was exposed to. So, true story, I closed my eyes and I pulled up a map first on a computer screen, closed my eyes and I pointed and it landed my finger. When I opened my eyes, it was on Tampa, Florida. I'd never even been to Tampa, never heard of Tampa. At the time, I was in nursing school to get my RN degree because I was an LPN first. So I said, Tampa, Florida. So I said, if I can find a church and I can find a job, we're moving to Tampa. Nobody knew what we were doing, right? Like nobody knew. So what I did was it was spring break coming up, and so I was looking for a job. I happened to see Tampa General. It was sitting on the water. I was like, a hospital on the water. Oh my God, I want to work there. And I got on Google and I started looking stuff up, and I got an interview. And the lady that interviewed me, she asked me, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, mind you, I'm still in RN school. I looked at her and I said, sitting in your seat. This was a white lady. And she was taken aback. She said, wow, nobody's ever said that to me before. Like, you see yourself sitting where I'm sitting? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, you have to have a master's degree. And I was like, I know. But at the time, I was an associate's degree. And then she hired me on the spot. Moved to Florida, found a church without walls, moved to Florida when my children got out of school. And we started here. We started here in Florida, and it's been almost 20 years. That was 2003.
Okay, so now let's talk about the transition pretty much from nursing and what made you want to like kind of get out of nursing, doing to what you're doing today, mentoring and real estate investor,
Right.
and all that.
Okay, so nursing was extremely, extremely, extremely taxing because I was working all the time, 12-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, and things like that. So with nursing, I was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I'd been a nurse for 25 years. I don't want to be a nurse anymore. So I need to figure out what I want to do. I had retired from doing hair. I did hair 23 years, nursing for 25. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I was tired of working for money. So I came across somebody in real estate, and they were living what looked to me the dream life. And so I got into real estate. So that's how I got in. All right, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of the story behind TMac Inspired. So we will have part 2 next week. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and do all of those YouTube-y things. And if you're listening, share this video, share this audio, share my show, because I know that it's going to help someone else. Until the next time, remember that Dr. TMac said you can have it all.